Teen street kid saves pregnant alien, unknowingly protecting a billionaire's wife. The city of Nexus was far from the bright and bustling place most people imagined when they thought of alien worlds. It was a place of shadows and neon lights, where humans were nothing more than outcasts, tolerated but never truly welcomed. The towering skyscrapers loomed above, their designs so alien that they made the few humans living here feel small and insignificant. The air always smelled faintly of sulfur, thick and oppressive. The rain, a constant companion to the city, fell in sheets, soaking through jackets and flooding the alleys. It wasn't the kind of place where you'd find hope. It was a place where survival was a constant struggle. Mac Reeves had learned that lesson early. At 17, he knew every corner of this city, every street, every alley. He knew where to get food, even if it wasn't much, and where to avoid trouble, though that was becoming harder and harder. The aliens who called Nexus home didn't make things easy for him. They looked at him like an outsider, like something beneath them. Humans weren't wanted here. They were rare, but that didn't make them special. The only thing that mattered was power, and Mac had none of it. Mac adjusted his worn jacket, pulling it tighter around his slim frame as the cold rain soaked through the fabric. The water seeped down his neck and into his boots, making his already uncomfortable situation worse. He kicked a broken food container out of his way and cursed under his breath, the words drowned out by the hum of passing alien hovercrafts. The neon signs of alien stores flashed above him, casting an eerie glow over his face. His jaw was set, eyes determined, as he walked through the streets, trying to ignore the biting cold and the gnawing hunger in his stomach. Another glorious day in paradise, Mac muttered sarcastically, taking a shortcut down an alley. The shortcut was supposed to lead him to the small, cramped apartment he shared with his mother, but as he walked, a strange sound caught his attention, a soft moan, almost lost in the steady drum of rain. Mac paused, his instincts kicking in. He wasn't the type to stop for strangers, especially in a city like Nexus, where danger lurked around every corner. But something about that sound, something in his gut, told him to check it out. He took a cautious step forward, peering around the corner of a stack of abandoned crates. What he saw made his heart skip a beat. There, huddled against the wall, was a woman. No, not a woman, an alien. She had pale, blue skin that shimmered faintly in the dim light, like the sky just before sunset. Her silver hair was plastered to her face by the rain, and her large, almond-shaped eyes were filled with a mix of pain and fear. Her clothes, once pristine, were now torn and filthy, hanging loosely around her thin frame. But it wasn't just her appearance that caught Mac's attention. It was her belly. She was pregnant. Very pregnant. Mac's eyes widened as he took a step closer. The alien woman shifted, letting out a small, weak groan. Mac's heart thudded painfully in his chest. She was in trouble. Big trouble. And despite all the dangers of the city, despite how badly things could go for a human helping an alien, Mac couldn't just walk away. "Hello," he called out cautiously, his voice hoarse from the cold. He crouched down beside her, careful not to startle her further. The alien woman's eyes flickered up to meet his. There was fear in them, but also something else, something more human, like a quiet plea for help. She opened her mouth to speak, but only a soft, pained breath came out. Her hands clutched at her swollen belly as another wave of pain washed over her. Mac didn't hesitate. "Are you okay? What happened?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady, though his mind raced. The street was dangerous enough without adding a pregnant alien into the mix. But the way she looked at him, the way she held herself, Mac knew she needed help. "They'll find me," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rain. Her silver tears mixed with the water dripping from her face as she clutched her abdomen. "I can't go back." Mac furrowed his brow. "Who's after you?" he asked, but she only shook her head, her eyes filled with a mix of desperation and sadness. Without thinking, Mac made a decision. His mind raced, trying to figure out what he could do. He glanced around the alley, his eyes landing on an abandoned hovercart near a market stall. It was old, rusty, and probably broken, but it would have to do. "I know someone who can help," Mac said quickly, though he didn't even know if the person he was thinking of could actually help. He wasn't a doctor. He wasn't even close. But he knew a guy, a weird underground doctor who didn't care about who you were or where you came from. If anyone could help her, it was Dr. Krell. Mac didn't wait for her to protest. He grabbed the hover cart and dragged it over, making enough noise to hopefully draw attention away from them. He helped the alien woman onto the cart, and despite her pain, she gripped his hand with surprising strength. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice soft but filled with gratitude. Mac nodded, keeping his eyes ahead, his focus fixed on getting them to safety. "Just hang on, all right?" he said, pushing the cart down the alleyway. He barely noticed the cold rain anymore. Only the woman in front of him, her hand clutching his tightly, as if her life depended on it. They moved as quickly as they could, but Mac couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger than just a simple act of kindness was happening. Helping her wasn't going to be as simple as he thought. But at that moment, he didn't care. For once in his life, Mac Reeves felt like he might be doing something right. Mac pushed the hover cart through the slick, wet streets, the dim glow of neon signs reflecting off the puddles beneath them. His feet splashed through the rain-soaked pavement as he focused solely on getting the alien woman to safety. Each second felt like an eternity, the weight of what he was doing bearing down on him with every step. He had no idea who she was or why she was in danger, but in that moment, it didn't matter. The alleyway was quiet, save for the distant hum of hovercrafts and the steady patter of the rain. His heart beat faster as they moved further away from the chaos of the busy streets. He kept his eyes ahead, but he couldn't shake the nagging feeling that someone, or something, was watching them. The alien woman shifted slightly on the cart, her hand still gripping his tightly, her breath shallow but steady. She had stopped crying, though the sadness still lingered in her eyes. As they moved further down the alley, Mac could hear her whispering softly, her voice barely audible over the rain. "Thank you for helping me," she said, her words quiet and filled with a mix of gratitude and fear. "You don't know what you've done." Mac didn't respond immediately. He wasn't sure what to say. It wasn't like he could walk away now, even if he wanted to. He had made a promise to help her, and it was one he intended to keep. But something about her words lingered, tugging at the back of his mind. "You're welcome," he finally muttered, his voice gruff. "But what's going on? Who's after you? You're not the first alien I've helped, but I've never seen anyone as desperate as you." The alien woman's large eyes flickered up to meet his for a brief moment. For the first time since he'd found her, a hint of fear flashed across her face. She swallowed, her lips trembling slightly. "It's not safe for me here," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "They'll find me. And if they do, it'll be the end of everything." Mac frowned, his grip on the cart tightening. Who was she running from? Who could possibly be so dangerous that it would make a pregnant alien woman fear for her life like this? The city of Nexus was no stranger to crime, but something told him this wasn't your typical street-level trouble. "Who are they?" Mac asked, his curiosity piqued. The alien woman hesitated, her eyes darting around as if checking for anyone who might be watching them. "The VIX Corporation," she said, her voice trembling as if the name itself was a death sentence. "They control everything in this sector. They're after me. And once they catch me, they'll take everything. My life. My baby. Everything." The name VIX hit Mac like a punch to the gut. He had heard rumors, of course. VIX Industries was a powerful corporation, one of the biggest players in the galaxy, and everyone knew that it had its fingers in every pie. Drugs, weapons, politics. If she was telling the truth, she wasn't just running from anyone. She was running from the most dangerous entity in the sector. Mac's mind raced. The VIX Corporation had its reach everywhere, from the highest towers to the darkest alleys. He had no idea why she was being hunted, but the fact that she had crossed their path and survived long enough to find him meant one thing. Her situation was bad. Real bad. "VIX, what do they want with you?" Mac asked, slowing the cart for a moment as they turned a corner, glancing over his shoulder to check the street behind them. His heart pounded as he took in their surroundings. It was too quiet. The alien woman took a shaky breath before speaking. "I can't say. Not yet. But they'll stop at nothing to find me. And when they do, it'll be the end for me and for my child." Mac's stomach churned at the mention of her child. His gaze flickered down to her swollen belly. Whatever Vix had planned, it involved this unborn child, and that terrified him more than anything else. Just as he was about to ask more, they reached the end of the alley, and Mac stopped the cart abruptly. Ahead of them was a large, grimy building with a flickering neon sign above the door that read Krell's Clinic. It wasn't much to look at, but Mac knew it was their best option. The doctor inside wasn't licensed, but he was known to help people who couldn't, or wouldn't, go to the official medical facilities. He was their best shot. "Here we are," Max said, letting out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Dr. Krell's clinic. He's our best bet." The alien woman nodded, her hand still gripping his tightly. "I can't stay here long," she said, her voice strained. "Please hurry." Mac didn't need any more prompting. He grabbed the cart and pushed it toward the door of the clinic, his eyes scanning the street one last time before he entered. He didn't know what to expect inside, but one thing was clear. Helping this woman wasn't just a gamble. It was a life-changing decision. As he entered the clinic, the door slid open with a mechanical whir, revealing a dimly lit room filled with shelves of medical equipment and sterile supplies. In the far corner, a tall, reptilian figure looked up from a set of holographic scans. Dr. Krell's sharp eyes locked onto Mac for a moment before scanning the alien woman with an expert eye. "Who's this?" Dr. Krell hissed, his vertical pupils dilating as he approached them. "Don't ask questions," Mac said quickly, his voice tight with urgency. "She's pregnant. She needs help." Dr. Krell didn't hesitate. He stepped forward, his claws clicking against the floor as he examined the alien woman with surprising gentleness. "Pregnant, eh? She's in labor," he muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. Mac's eyes widened, his mind racing. He had no idea what he had gotten himself into, but there was no turning back now. This woman, this alien, was on the edge of something dangerous, and he was caught in the middle of it. But what Mac didn't know was that by helping her, he had just made a decision that would shape the course of his life and the future of two species. Dr. Krell's clinic was nothing like the sterile, high-tech hospitals that humans were accustomed to. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic, mixed with something a little darker, a little more mysterious. The walls were lined with shelves filled with strange medical instruments, some of them alien in design, others far too old to be in any legitimate establishment. Despite the unsettling atmosphere, Mac couldn't afford to second-guess himself now. The woman on the hover cart needed help, and Krell was the only one who could give it to her. "Help me get her on the table," Dr. Krell ordered, his voice surprisingly calm for a creature whose species was known for their cold-blooded demeanor. He was a saurian, an alien species known for their reptilian features, and his yellow-green scales glistened in the dim light. His long fingers, tipped with sharp claws, moved deftly as he started preparing his equipment. Mac rushed to help, lifting the alien woman gently from the cart and placing her on the examination table. Her face contorted with pain as another contraction hit, and she gasped, clutching Mac's hand tightly. He tried to reassure her with a look, though he wasn't sure if she could even understand. "Just hang in there. You're safe now," Mac murmured, his voice shaky. The alien woman's eyes flickered open, and for a brief moment, her pain seemed to ease. I'm Lira," she whispered, her voice weak but melodic. "Thank you for helping me. I didn't know where else to go." Mac nodded, his stomach tightening. "Don't thank me yet," he replied. "We've got a long way to go." But before Lira could respond, a loud crash echoed from the clinic's entrance. The door burst open with a violent force, the sound of boots clanging against the metal floor followed by deep, commanding voices. Mac's heart dropped as he turned to see a group of heavily armored figures storming into the clinic, their weapons drawn. "Step away from the female," the leader of the group barked, pointing his blaster at Dr. Krell. "Now." Mac instinctively stepped in front of Lira, his heart racing. The guards wore the emblem of VIX Industries, the twisted helix symbol that Mac had seen far too many times on the streets. His stomach churned with dread. He had no idea who these people were, but he knew enough about VIX Industries to know that nothing good ever came from them. "They'll kill her if we don't get out of here," Mac muttered, his eyes darting around the clinic for an escape route. But there was nowhere to run. The leader of the guard sneered, his eyes scanning Mac and Dr. Krell. "This doesn't concern you, human," the guard said coldly, his voice dripping with disdain. "Stay out of it." Mac's grip tightened around the blaster he kept hidden in his jacket, his fingers brushing against the cool metal. He wasn't a fighter, but he knew that if it came down to it, he would do whatever it took to protect Lira. The woman had saved his life just by showing up in his alley, and he wasn't going to let her be taken away, especially not by these monsters. "Mac, get back," Dr. Krell hissed, his voice low but sharp. He moved to stand between Mac and the guards, his reptilian eyes narrowing. I've treated people like you before. I'm no friend of Vic's, and neither is she. The lead guard's eyes flicked between Krell and Lira. Then you'll have to come with us too, Krell, he said with a twisted smile. Vix wants his wife back, and that means you're all coming with us. The word wife hit Mac like a punch to the stomach. Lira wasn't just some random alien. She was married to Torrin Vix, the most powerful and most dangerous billionaire in the sector. And now, she was running from him. But why? Why would she be hiding? Please. Lyra's voice was soft, but full of pain as she looked up at Mac. I didn't want this. I never asked for any of this. They'll kill my baby. Kill me if they find us. Mac's thoughts raced, the weight of the situation crashing down on him. The Vix Corporation was ruthless, and their influence stretched far and wide. This was no longer just a matter of helping an alien woman. It was a war, and Mac had unwittingly stepped right into the middle of it. The guard with the blaster stepped forward, aiming his weapon at Dr. Krell. Enough talk. Move, now. Mac's heart was pounding in his chest. He couldn't let them take her. He couldn't let them take her baby. There had to be another way out. His eyes flicked toward the back of the clinic, where a series of narrow corridors led deeper into the building. He knew Krell had hidden supplies and rooms back there, places where he'd worked on all sorts of illegal treatments. It might be their only chance. Dr. Krell, we need to move her, Mac said urgently, his voice barely above a whisper. Can you get her out the back? Krell hesitated for a moment, his gaze shifting between the guards and the doorway behind him. Then, with a sharp nod, he gave Mac a look that told him everything he needed to know. They had no choice but to make a run for it. Before the guards could react, Mac grabbed Lyra's arm, pulling her to her feet. Krell led the way, moving with surprising speed for his size, his claws clicking softly on the metal floor. Mac followed close behind, keeping Lira steady as she struggled to stay upright. Her contractions were getting worse, and her breathing was labored, but she managed to keep pace, her eyes wide with fear. They reached the back corridor, and Krell quickly shut the door behind them, locking it with a mechanical click. The sounds of the guards shouting at the door echoed through the clinic as Krell led them deeper into the hidden parts of the building. This way, Krell said, leading them down a narrow passage. I know a way out, but it won't be easy. Mac nodded, his mind spinning with the gravity of what was happening. He had no idea what he had gotten himself into, but he knew one thing for sure. There was no turning back now. As they moved through the clinic's hidden corridors, Mac couldn't help but feel like he was part of something much bigger than himself, something dangerous, something that could change the fate of not just him and Lira, but of an entire galaxy. And deep down, he knew that Vix wouldn't stop until he had his wife back. The storm was just beginning. The hidden passageways of Dr. Krell's underground clinic twisted like the veins of the city above, leading them further away from the chaos they had left behind. The air grew colder as they ventured deeper into the bowels of the building, and the faint sound of the guards' shouts became a distant echo, swallowed by the thick walls. Mac could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He had taken Lira from the clinic, pulling her into a dangerous escape, but the gravity of their situation was just beginning to sink in. Krell led them through a narrow, dimly lit corridor that smelled faintly of antiseptic and something metallic, like old blood. It was a far cry from the sleek, pristine medical facilities that humans were used to. The walls were lined with cracked tiles, some of them covered in dust, others showing signs of hurried repairs. There was no luxury here, just survival. Mac's mind raced. Why was Lira running? What had she done to make her a target for the most powerful man in the sector? And why was she so afraid? The words, "They'll kill me, kill my baby," echoed in his mind like a haunting refrain. Are we safe here? Lyra's voice broke through his thoughts, her hand still clinging to his arm. Her voice was shaky, and her face was pale from the pain of her contractions. She was clearly struggling, but her eyes remained sharp, full of an urgency that Mac hadn't seen in her before. She wasn't just running from Vix, she was running from something much worse. We're safe for now, Krell answered, not turning to face them, but continuing his brisk pace. But we won't be for long. The Vix Corporation is relentless. They have eyes everywhere. We need to move quickly. Mac glanced at Lira, whose face was etched with exhaustion and fear. The fear was palpable, and it made his chest tighten. He didn't know what had happened between her and Vix, but the look in her eyes was enough to tell him she wasn't just another frightened victim. She was someone who had been through hell and was now fighting for her life and the life of her child. Krell stopped in front of a door, his hand hovering over a keypad on the wall. This leads to the back exit. It'll take you to the outskirts of Nexus, far from the Vix-controlled sectors. But be warned, if the guards catch up with us, this place won't offer much protection. Mac nodded, the adrenaline in his veins making his senses sharper. We'll make it work. He helped Lira toward the door, but as he did, his mind kept returning to the one question he hadn't dared ask yet. Why was Vix after her? What was so important about her baby? And why had she come to him? The door hissed open with a soft mechanical whir, revealing a narrow tunnel lit by flickering overhead lights. It was cramped, and the walls were covered with graffiti that looked like it had been hastily scrawled. No one ever came down here. Mac knew that much. It was a forgotten part of the city, used only by those trying to stay hidden. Krell motioned for them to follow him into the tunnel. Stay close, he muttered. We need to get out of here before Vix's men regroup. They'll be searching every corner of this city in no time. As they walked, Mac could hear Lyra's soft gasps of pain. Her contractions were getting closer, and he knew they didn't have much time. Hang on, Lira, he said, trying to keep his voice steady. We're almost there. But Lyra's gaze seemed distant, lost in thoughts that Mac couldn't begin to understand. She had been through something that haunted her. He could see it in the way her hands trembled, the way she kept looking over her shoulder as if expecting someone to appear from the shadows. It wasn't just the guards she was afraid of. Why did they come for you? Mac asked, his voice low but urgent. What is it about your baby that makes Vix want you so badly? Lyra's eyes flickered toward him, her lips trembling as she struggled to speak. She opened her mouth, then closed it, as if the words were too painful to say. Finally, she exhaled a slow, ragged breath. I don't know how to explain this, she began, her voice barely above a whisper. But Vix, he's not just after me. He's after my child. Mac's stomach twisted with dread. Your child? Lira nodded slowly, her silver hair damp and matted against her forehead. My daughter. She's not just any child. She's the key to Vix's plan. He wants her because she's different. She's special. Mac's mind raced. Special how? Lira paused, her gaze hardening as she looked at Mac. My daughter is the product of an experiment, she said, her voice thick with emotion. A genetic experiment. Vix had me altered. He used my DNA and modified it to create a child with extraordinary abilities. But that's not the worst part. The worst part is that my daughter, she's the first of her kind. A hybrid. Half human, half alien. Mac stopped dead in his tracks, his heart skipping a beat. Half human, half alien. Vix, he's trying to create a new generation of soldiers, genetically enhanced beings who will be loyal only to him. And my daughter is the prototype. She has the potential to be the strongest of them all. But Vix wants to control her, to use her to lead an army of hybrids. The weight of her words hit Mac like a ton of bricks. This wasn't just a case of a runaway pregnant alien. Lira wasn't just any woman. She was part of something much bigger, something that could change the fate of humanity. And now, her daughter, this hybrid child, was the key to everything. We have to stop him, Mac said, his voice filled with determination. We can't let him have her. Lyra's eyes softened as she looked at him. That's what I'm trying to do, Mac. But the only way to stop him is to expose everything he's been doing. The experiments, the hybrids, everything. As they moved deeper into the tunnel, Mac felt the weight of the responsibility settling on his shoulders. They were no longer just running from Vix. They were fighting back. And this fight would change everything. The tunnel twisted and turned beneath Nexus, a dark, forgotten underbelly of the city where the faint glow of the lights above couldn't quite reach. The deeper they went, the colder it became, and the air grew thick with dust and the smell of old machinery. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the distant hum of the city above and the sound of their footsteps echoing off the stone walls. Mac's heart pounded in his chest, but it wasn't just the adrenaline of the chase. It was the weight of everything he had learned in the last few hours. Lira, still gripping his arm, moved with an unsettling grace despite the strain of her contractions. She was strong, he could tell, but even the strongest people had limits. And from the way she was breathing, from the look in her eyes, Mac knew they were running out of time. "Where are we going, Krell?" Mac asked, his voice low but urgent as he glanced around the dim tunnel. Dr. Krell led the way, his reptilian form darting around corners with practiced ease. "Just keep moving," Krell replied, his voice tense. "We're heading for a safe house. It's the only place I know that's far enough from Vix's reach." Mac didn't respond. There wasn't much to say. He could feel the pressure mounting. They were so close to the edge of the city now that the silence seemed to hang heavier, more suffocating. The further they got from the clinic, the more Mac felt like they were drifting into a place where nothing would make sense anymore. He wasn't just helping Lira now. He was part of something much bigger. The puzzle pieces were all starting to come together, but the image they formed was far from what he expected. Lira shifted uncomfortably beside him, her breath shallow as another contraction hit. She winced, and Mac could see the pain etched deep into her face. For the first time since meeting her, she looked vulnerable, completely human. He had seen her as a warrior, a mother, but now he saw the woman who had been running from something much bigger than herself. "Lira, I don't understand," Mac said, his voice barely a whisper, though it felt like his throat was tight with the weight of the question. "Why didn't you just tell me the truth? Why hide all this?" Lyra's eyes flickered toward him, and for a moment, there was something almost mournful in her gaze. "I wanted to tell you," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of their footsteps. "But if I had, you never would have helped me. Vix doesn't just control the galaxy with money, Mac. He controls it with fear. Fear of what he can do to you, to your family, to everything you care about. I didn't want to drag you into this. But now, I don't have a choice." Mac thought about her words for a moment, the meaning settling deep in his chest. He could see it now, why she had kept so much hidden, why she had been so distant, so guarded. Vix had built his empire on fear and control, and Lira was no different from the many people who had been crushed beneath that weight. She had been a pawn in his game, but now she was a part of something much more dangerous, the key to unlocking a new future, one that Vix would never allow. But Mac wasn't ready to accept that just yet. He had to know more. "Tell me about your daughter," Mac pressed, his voice barely a murmur. "What's so special about her?" Lyra's gaze softened, her eyes filled with a mixture of pain and pride. She stopped walking for a moment, and Mac halted beside her, sensing that this was the moment she would share the truth, the thing that had been hidden for so long. "My daughter," Lira began, her voice shaky but resolute, "wasn't born by accident. Vix, he used me, my DNA. The experiments, Mac, they weren't just about creating soldiers. They were about creating a new kind of life. A hybrid. My daughter is the first of her kind, part human, part Nilarian. Her DNA is a perfect blend of the two species." Mac's eyes widened as he processed her words. "But why her?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "What does she have that makes her different from other hybrids? Why is Vix so obsessed with her?" Lyra's gaze hardened, and she took a shaky breath. "Because she's the key to unlocking the next stage of evolution," she said, her voice tinged with bitterness. "Vix has been creating these hybrids for years, experimenting with human and Nilarian genes. But my daughter, she's something more. She's not just a soldier. She's the ultimate weapon, a being who can control the minds of others, who can bend them to her will. Her abilities are far beyond anything Vix could have imagined. And that's why he's willing to do anything to get her back." Mac's mind raced. A child with the power to control minds? A weapon like that could shift the balance of power in the entire galaxy. And Vix wasn't just going to let it slip through his fingers. "You can't let him have her," Mac said, his voice firm. "We have to stop him." Lyra's eyes flickered with both fear and determination. "I know, but there's more to this than just stopping Vix. The hybrids, the children he's created, they've all been altered. Their minds are being shaped, programmed to be soldiers for Vix's war. But my daughter, she's different. She's the one who could break the cycle. She's the one who could end it all." Mac nodded, feeling the weight of what he was carrying. He wasn't just saving a woman and her child anymore. He was carrying the fate of two species, the future of humanity and of the Nilarian race. Vix had created a world where these hybrids were slaves to his power, but Lyra's daughter had the potential to destroy that world. "If she's the key," Mac said slowly, "then we can't let Vix get his hands on her. We have to protect her at all costs." Lira nodded, her face set in determination. "That's why I came to you, Mac. I need your help. You're the only one who can stop him now. But as the words left her lips, the distant sound of footsteps echoed through the tunnel. The hairs on the back of Mac's neck stood up. They weren't alone anymore. We've got company, Krell growled, his hand moving toward the blaster at his side. Mac turned to face the darkness behind them, the feeling of being hunted creeping back into his bones. It wasn't just a race against time anymore. It was a fight for survival, a fight that would determine the future of both species. And Mac knew that the stakes were higher than he had ever imagined. The hunt was on. The further they moved through the dark corridors of Nexus' forgotten underworld, the more Mac felt the weight of the decision that lay ahead pressing down on him. It wasn't just the physical threat of Vix's men getting closer. It was the knowledge that everything he had done up to this point, the help he had given Lira, the promise he had made to protect her, had led him to a point of no return. He was no longer just a kid trying to scrape by on the streets. He was in the middle of a war that spanned galaxies, a war that would change everything for both humans and aliens. The tunnel opened up into a small, dimly lit room. A few flickering lights cast long shadows on the walls, and a stale smell lingered in the air. It wasn't much, but it was far from the prying eyes of the Vix guards. For now, they were safe. Mac's breath came in shallow gasps, his pulse still racing from the sprint through the dark streets. Lira, though still in pain, seemed to relax for a moment, her grip on his arm loosening. Krell, who had been leading the way, stopped at the door to the room and turned to face them. "We don't have much time," he said, his voice low and serious. "They'll be closing in soon. We have to move." Mac nodded, but his gaze kept flickering back to Lira. She was pale, her face drawn tight with pain, and though she was trying to stay strong, it was clear she was exhausted. The contractions were coming faster now, her breathing becoming more shallow. He knew she didn't have much time left before the baby would arrive, and the thought of delivering a child in a cramped, dark room in the middle of an alien city was more than a little terrifying. "Are you okay?" Mac asked, though the answer was clear. She wasn't. Lira nodded weakly, her lips curving into a faint, tired smile. "I'll be fine," she said, though the words lacked conviction. "I just need to rest for a moment." Mac didn't believe her, but he wasn't about to push her. He could feel the weight of everything they had been through, everything they were about to face, bearing down on him. The urgency of their escape was only matched by the responsibility he felt to keep Lira and her unborn child safe. They settled in the corner of the small room, and Mac watched as Lira tried to calm her breathing. He couldn't help but notice the fear in her eyes, the fear of the unknown, the fear of what would happen when Vix found them. What would he do? How far would he go to get what he wanted? He didn't have to think too hard to know the answer. Vix wouldn't stop at anything to get Lira and her child back. "How much further?" Mac asked, his voice tight with tension as he turned to Krell. Krell paused, his yellow-green eyes scanning the small room, his gaze lingering on Lira's condition. "There's a hideout a few clicks away. It's the last place Vix would look for us, but it's not much. It's a safe house, but it's temporary. Once we're there, we can figure out our next move." Mac nodded. It was better than nothing. But he knew the closer they got to their destination, the more desperate things would become. Suddenly, a soft chime from Mac's personal communicator broke the silence. He reached for it, his heart skipping a beat. It was an encrypted message. His hand shook as he activated the screen. The message was short, just a few words. "We know where you are. You have 10 minutes before we make our move. Choose wisely." The message was from Vix. Mac's blood ran cold as he read the words again, his mind racing. He had no idea how they had found him, but it was clear that the walls were closing in fast. Krell cursed under his breath. "They're already on us. We need to move now." Lira, hearing the urgency in Krell's voice, looked up, her face pale but determined. "What is it?" she asked, her voice cracking slightly. "They found us," Mac said, his voice low but firm. "We have 10 minutes to get out of here before Vix's men arrive." Lira's eyes widened, panic flashing across her face. But it was only for a moment. Her expression quickly hardened into something stronger, something that told Mac she wasn't going to go down without a fight. "We can't just run anymore, Mac. We need to stop him." Mac stared at her, taken aback. He had assumed she wanted to escape, to get as far away from Nexus and Vix as possible. But the fire in her eyes told him that wasn't what she wanted. She wasn't just running. She was ready to fight. And she wasn't the type to do so passively. Stop him, Mac echoed, his voice full of disbelief. How? He controls everything. He owns this city, this sector. How do you stop someone like him? Lira took a deep breath, steadying herself. I have something that could stop him. Something that could change everything. But it comes at a cost. What cost? Mac asked, his stomach tightening. Lira reached into the pocket of her torn bodysuit and pulled out a small, sleek device. It was no bigger than a palm-sized data pad, but it hummed with quiet power, a soft blue light pulsing from the center. This device contains all the information on Vix's operations. The experiments, the hybrids, the entire plan he's been building for years. If I release this information, it will expose everything. It will destroy Vix's entire empire in one stroke. Mac's mind whirled. If Lira was telling the truth, this was a game changer. Exposing Vix's plans could bring him down, could free the hybrids, could stop the manipulation and genetic manipulation he had been conducting for so long. But there was one big problem. Vix will kill us before we ever get the chance to release that, Max said, shaking his head. This device is worth more to him than anything else. If he finds out we have it, we're dead. Lira's expression softened. I know, but if we don't do this, nothing will change. Nexus will remain under his control. The hybrids will continue to be his weapons. And my daughter will be lost forever. Mac's heart pounded as he looked at her. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about making a choice that would either save them or destroy them all. He could take the device, keep running, and hope for safety, but what kind of life would they have in hiding? Or he could risk everything and expose Vix, hoping that the truth would be their weapon against him. And just as he opened his mouth to speak, the door to the hideout slammed open, and the sound of heavy boots echoed down the hall. We don't have time for this, Krell growled, his claws flexing as he grabbed Mac by the arm. We make our move now. The rest can wait. The decision was made for them. The air in the hidden room was thick with tension. The device Lira had pulled from her pocket hummed softly, its blue light pulsing steadily as if it were alive, aware of the monumental choice it represented. Mac's heart raced in his chest, each beat louder than the last. The moment of truth had arrived. There was no more time to hide, no more time to think. Vix's men were on their way, and they would stop at nothing to get what they wanted. We need to move, Krell growled, his voice sharp as he glanced nervously at the door. The muffled sound of boots hitting the floor echoed from the hall outside. The guards were already here, or at least close enough to make their presence known. Now, Mac's fingers tightened around the device in his hand. Every instinct in his body screamed at him to run, to protect himself and Lira, to get away while they still had the chance. But the look in Lira's eyes, the sheer determination behind them, held him in place. No, Lira said quietly, her voice steady. She met Mac's gaze, her eyes full of resolve. This is it. We have to finish this. The weight of her words hit him like a freight train. They weren't just running anymore. They were going to fight. They were going to end this, no matter the cost. The realization made his blood run cold. But it also made his chest swell with a strange, fiery sense of purpose. Mac nodded, his throat tight. He was scared, terrified, even, but there was no turning back now. They had come too far, sacrificed too much to back out now. We'll do it, Mac said, his voice hoarse. We're going to take him down. With that, the sound of pounding footsteps grew louder outside the door. Krell's sharp eyes darted to the door's control panel, quickly scanning for any security measures. There wasn't time to waste. He pressed a few buttons, and the door clicked open. They didn't have a plan. They didn't have much of anything, except the device, their will to fight, and the belief that exposing the truth could change everything. As the door swung open, Mac's eyes locked onto the corridor outside. The shadows seemed to stretch and shift unnaturally in the dim light, hiding the soldiers that were closing in on them. Vix's men were everywhere, and Mac knew that if they weren't fast, if they didn't act now, they wouldn't make it out alive. But there was something else, something in his gut, telling him that this was the moment. This was the battle that would decide their fate, the fate of Lira's daughter, and the future of every hybrid Vix had created. They had nothing left to lose. We run for the exit, Krell said, his voice cold as he ushered them forward. He took the lead, his sharp claws clicking on the stone floor, guiding them through the twisting passages of the hideout. Mac and Lira followed close behind, their footsteps barely making a sound as they navigated the maze-like corridors. Mac glanced at Lira. Her face was a mask of determination, but there was something else in her eyes. A kind of quiet acceptance. She knew what this would cost. She knew that even if they managed to escape, even if they managed to get to the device to the authorities, there was a good chance they wouldn't make it out alive. But still, she walked beside him, her steps steady and sure, like she was leading them all to salvation. They reached the final doorway, the one that led to the outside. The cold, rainy night outside loomed ahead like a black void. The door was cracked, and the sound of distant engines could be heard through the metal walls. The VIX forces were close, much closer than Mac had hoped. "We're almost there," Krell whispered. "Get ready." Mac nodded, his heart thudding in his chest. He could feel the adrenaline rushing through him, making every nerve in his body stand at attention. There was no room for fear anymore. They had come this far. There was no going back. Suddenly, the door to the hideout flew open with a deafening crash, and the sound of blaster fire rang out. The guards had found them. "Go? Now!" Krell shouted. Mac's legs moved before his brain could catch up. He darted through the doorway, pulling Lira with him. She stumbled slightly, her body shaking with the strain, but she didn't falter. They ran out into the rain, the cold water pelting down on them, soaking them to the bone. The city of Nexus stretched out in front of them, vast, sprawling, and indifferent. But for the first time, Mac didn't feel small. He felt powerful, determined. He wasn't just a pawn in someone else's game anymore. He had a purpose. He was going to stop VIX, no matter what it took. Behind them, Krell was still holding off the guards, his claws slashing through the air as he fired back with precision. The sound of his battle with VIX's soldiers echoed in the distance, but Mac didn't look back. They had no time to waste. "Get to the ship," Krell called out. "I'll hold them off. You need to get that device to the council." Mac's heart clenched at the thought of leaving Krell behind, but he knew this was their only shot. He grabbed Lira's arm, pulling her along as they sprinted toward the ship, a small, sleek transport that would take them to the next stage of their plan. The ship's engines roared to life as they reached it, the sleek metal reflecting the neon lights of the city. Mac jumped into the cockpit, his fingers flying over the controls. Lira climbed into the co-pilot seat, and without another word, they shot into the sky. But even as they ascended, Mac couldn't shake the feeling that VIX was already ahead of them. He would stop at nothing to regain control. But that was the thing about VIX. He didn't understand humans. He didn't understand the will to fight, the determination to survive no matter the cost. Mac turned to Lira, who was staring out the window, her expression unreadable. "We'll get the truth out," Mac said, his voice steady. "We'll take him down. We're not done yet." Lira nodded, her eyes softening as she met his gaze. "No, we're just beginning." As the ship flew into the void of space, leaving Nexus behind, Mac knew one thing for certain. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for the future. And no matter what VIX threw their way, they would never stop.